morning, everyone, and welcome to the Pines Manor. For those of you who are here live, we also have today over 300 individuals on our webinar for today's IssuesWatch update live with Barry Melancon, who's president and CEO of the AICPA. But before we get started, I want to thank the representatives from Investors Bank who is here today, who is sponsoring today's program. Clearly, we would not be able to do the types of programs that we do without sponsors like Investors. We have with us today Daniel Murphy, an assistant vice president with professional services, and John Selma, who's in the back also from Investors Bank as well. So I'd ask Dan to come up for a few moments to bring us greetings and enlighten us about Investors. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Ralph. Good morning, everybody. Just wanted to take a couple of moments and, number one, say thank you very much for allowing us the opportunity to be here today. It's a nice Friday morning. I know the commute was pretty easy for most people coming in this morning, but wanted to talk about the bank for a little bit. Investors is around now for 90 years, and we are the largest bank headquartered in New Jersey, with our headquarters located up in Short Hills. We have approximately 100 to 110 branches located within the New Jersey area. We go up as north in the Bergen County area into Fort Lee. We come all the way down south on the East Coast going towards the Toms River Whiting area, and then we go west all the way out towards Cherry Hill. So it gives us a lot of opportunity to reach out to your firms, to your clients, to many people in regards to the many services that we offer. There's a few special niche areas that we do have. We are a very, very strong lender in regards to commercial real estate, regular commercial lending, healthcare, asset-based, as well as residential lending. And there's a whole other bunch of areas that we offer as well. We do have regional lending offices in Short Hills, Robbinsville, Spring Lake, and we also go into New York as well. We have an additional 30 branches out that way as well. Also, we have a very strong nonprofit area that we love to give many opportunities to. We have a foundation that has given to many different charities across the board that cover both health and human services, arts and education. Recently, about 2 years ago, the bank went fully public, where we were able to put in an additional $20 million into our foundation that has been able to help a variety of different nonprofits across the board. And it also gets our branch people involved, where not only are they just involved face-to-face with the heads of the foundations themselves, but they actually go out and they help out. They help out with Habitat for Humanity, American Heart Association. Those are the bigger ones, but there's so many others that are near and dear to the company as well. But again, we definitely appreciate the opportunity here. Thank you to Ralph, thank you to everybody with the society, and thank you all for having us, and we'll be in the back. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Dan and John, for being here. We certainly appreciate the tremendous support that you have provided the society over the years, and we look forward to seeing you down in Atlantic City in a couple of weeks, a little over a month. Well, as I said, good morning. It's really a pleasure to be here today, and I think you're going to be in for a real treat. I certainly could stand up here and probably take up the entire time introducing our keynote speaker, and I'm seeing Mike Polito now saying, oh boy, my goodness, look, Ralph has the microphone. But if you don't know Barry Melancon, I have to kind of ask where you've been. I've known Barry for, I think, over 25 years now, and Barry was very instrumental in me coming to the society. I had a conversation with him about the opportunity, and he said, Ralph, I think this would be a great thing for you to do. It won't be like investment banking or anything, but you will be able to make a difference. But clearly, Barry Melancon, President and CEO of the AICPA, has been someone who has made a difference in our profession. He's been at the helm since 1995, right, Barry? And I think has done a great job through some ups and downs of the profession, and has brought the CPA profession, I think, a long way. He's recognized worldwide as one of the leaders in the accounting and finance area. And so I will just say we're going to be in for a treat today, I think, with what we have. And I think Barry has a lot that he will be able to offer. So I'm going to get off the stage and bring forth Barry Melancon, the president and CEO of the AICPA.
Thanks, Ralph. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ralph. Ralph and I are really, really close friends, yes, and we do play golf, and he actually beats me a lot. So, you know, that's a little bit of a troubling thing there, Ralph. I'm just picking. Handicap, right. Those strokes. It's great to be here. So many old friends and some new friends, and obviously a lot of people on the webcast. Ralph and his team and just do a tremendous job. I have the opportunity to travel around the world, certainly in all the states of this country, about related to our profession, and you should feel really, really good about what your society does and the partnership that we have, and we do view it as a partnership. The issues of the profession today are truly complex and rapid, and it takes an all hands-on type of an approach to have our profession be successful in the long term, and that relationship, I think, is very, very important. So that's sort of the context of today, really, is to really talk about where the profession is and what some of the evolution is. And that is important because we live in this society where, you know, the future is a bit uncertain, right? It changes so rapidly, there's so many challenges that we have to be willing as a profession to not live by the stereotype of our image of maybe being ultra-conservative as CPAs and not willing to change. And I said stereotype, not reality. And to actually take and seize opportunities for new services and evolution of our profession. I like to use the analogy, this is a Warren Buffett quote, about what we do today is really about today, but it's also about tomorrow. And that is the notion of planting a tree. You know, trees take a while to grow and affect the landscape and create shade, and that is really about everything we do as members of the profession today is to deliver on our mission today, but also to create a future for the profession that's successful. People did that for us. Our profession today is incredibly successful, and people did that for us in the past, and a little bit later I'll remind you of some of those changes that have occurred in our profession. We also in a society today that, you know, there is a huge amount of change. These are just some quotes from different people from all walks of life in the profession. Embracing the notion of evolution, embracing the evolution of different types of services, embracing the evolution of how the profession can play a very important role in this uncertain times of how business and really society evolves. And there really are some very significant elements to that. This is a recent Harvard Business Review cover, and I think it really captures sort of the thinking we have to have as a profession. And you know, there were three bullet points here about what was in this particular report or this particular issue. Be paranoid, disrupt yourself, and go to war for talent. And those three elements really are about how you deal with change and how you create a future. Being paranoid is a word or a thought of the notion of we have to think that we aren't insulated from what can happen and what is happening, and if we embrace those things and we see opportunities, that's our best plan for success. Disrupt yourself. One of the things that I think happens is that it is very difficult to disrupt yourself, right? It's very difficult as a business. You have revenue streams, you have people. It's very difficult as a profession to say we're going to do some things that change sort of what we're comfortable to. It's always easier for somebody else to disrupt yourself. We only need to think about Uber and taxis around the world, right? You can, right across the river, we can go into Manhattan, and today there are more Uber cars on the road than yellow cabs. And all of us in New Jersey and New York know exactly how much the yellow cab industry is a part of the historic fiber of New York City. Yet, in almost a blink of an eye, that whole industry has changed because different approaches to dealing with consumers, different uses of technology, challenging the status quo, challenging the regulatory infrastructure, produced a different economic outcome. And there are stories after stories after stories. And so it's easy to say, when we look at our profession, our brand is incredibly strong. It's the strongest it's ever been. We actually measure it. We survey every 2 years business decision makers and investors. What do they think about the CPA profession? We have a score associated with it. It's the highest it's ever been. We've been doing this for decades. Frankly, the profession is as profitable as it's ever been, maybe more profitable than it's ever been. We have talent issues. The go to war for talent is there. We want to attract people, but our competition is dealing with society as a whole for talent. It's not that people aren't interested in accounting. Actually, we have record numbers of people majoring in accounting. So that's a positive from that standpoint. And we deal in trust. The CPA profession, its values, its core competencies are about dealing in trust. And we live in a society that frankly has a pretty big gap of trust, right? We don't trust the media, we don't trust institutions, we don't trust government, we don't trust politicians, we don't trust the internet. You know, society as a whole doesn't trust anything, and so we're sort of uniquely positioned to be purveyors of trust. That's a great positioning. But to think we don't have risk, to think we don't have people who are looking at us, at our profession, at what we do, whether we're in public practice or industry, and say there's a better way. There's a better use of technology. There's a way around regulation. We can commercialize it differently, would be naive on our part. And we'll share some thoughts around that. Now, I'm not going to go into each of these trends, but these are trends that we focus on very significantly as we do planning for the profession. And, you know, we all know about some of these. The international shifts, clearly the growth in companies, the growth in business is for the most part not in the developed nations of the world. Now, that ebbs and flows with economic times, but the real, if you project out growth over the next decade plus, it's going to be more in developing nations than it is in developed nations. If I would have brought leaders of firms together 10 years ago, if we could go back in time 10 years ago, put them around a table in the front of this room, ask them what was on their agenda and their networks and things of that nature, the big four, the next tier, major companies, China would have been on their network, on their agenda. China's on people's agenda still today, but also Africa is on everybody's agenda. Huge infrastructure investments being made in Africa and people projecting that growth. Well, that's not necessarily a region we focus on from an American business perspective. The economies are very unpredictable. Specialization in our profession, the saying is specialization is the antidote to complexity. That is true. Clients and employers expect you to bring certain knowledge in that space. We're also going to talk about broader-based knowledge because deep technical knowledge is sort of table stakes. It's expected. It's those other skills that are important for success as well. We're learning differently today. How we go about learning, for instance, would be big advocates of changing the concept of CPE from a measurement of time or sitting in a chair to more of an output-based measurement. There are other places in the world that's doing that. We think with the next generation that that's a real important change for the profession, and we've started some seeds to change from that standpoint. On the right-hand side, technology will evolve, and I'll spend a few minutes about auditing in the future. We probably, in the next 5 years, will not recognize auditing with the amount of investment that's being made in this space, and it's a real challenge of how do we bring that technology to smaller firms, because bigger firms are investing hundreds of millions of dollars in artificial intelligence and big data. How is that going to change what auditing will be? Obviously, the war for talent, and there's some significant challenges the world is facing in talent. Adult workforces are essentially reducing around the world. There's only a couple of countries in the world where it's increasing. And clearly, from the profession's perspective, there's an attractiveness that we need to be mindful of. Now, we've done a good job with it. New Jersey is very aggressive in dealing with students and young people, and Ralph does a great job and the whole team. But the fact of the matter is there's still challenges that we have to be focused on. Obviously, we live in a world of hyper-regulation. We've exported that as Americans to most other places in the world. And there, you know, traditionally in our profession's history, regulation has been a pendulum. There's a problem and it gets, you know, ramped up, and then sort of a rationalization comes back. We're living in an era in which that pendulum has been pegged, and it tends to want to continue to edge forward, and there's not a whole lot of gravity pulling it back. It's the political environment that we're in, and so That's a sword that cuts both ways for our profession. It's what we deliver in value, but it's obviously very, very complex. And finally, competition. Our competition of the future is not, if you're in public practice, the firm down the street. Yes, that's a piece of your competition. But the bigger competition is technology and technology providers and other businesses that the CPA profession, or what we do in a different way. And to the extent we think about competition as we have for the past 125 years, we'll probably be a net loser in that particular environment. So let's do a quick look at a few issues in the legislative area, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time in our proposal and our evolution from an AICPA perspective as well. First off, we live in a very uncertain legislative environment, obviously an uncertain presidential election environment, but there are some things moving forward. So for instance, we try to bring a lot of practicality to it. There is not going to be major tax reform. This Congress is not producing that. However, there is groundwork being done that there is a potential, depending on the results of the election, there is a potential for the first time in probably maybe 6 or 8 years for some significant tax bill to come about in 2017. Speaker Ryan, who was chairman of Ways and Means, it's a big issue to him. There are actually hearings taking place in May and June in both the House and the Senate that is intended to be laying groundwork for the potential for tax reform. Now, we can play different scenarios on how the election's going to come out, and that answer could come out differently. But we also are tackling some simplification type of issues. Mobile workforce is one. So we believe that the compliance cost to business, this is not a CPA issue, to business, of workers moving across state lines on a temporary basis for state income tax purposes is not worth what is actually happening in the tax generation type of area. And so we have proposed a simplified approach nationwide that would say that if a worker is temporarily across state lines, that where they're not changing residence and they're less than 30 days, that they would be exempt from the income tax in those other states that they're temporarily working in, under the assumption that over time that will pretty much even out. And the compliance cost for companies who want to do the right thing just doesn't make sense from the revenue side. It's gotten overly complex, and the mobility of people has made it much more common. And of course, states face money issues, and so they're being aggressive in that, which just continues to set a spiral in place from the standpoint of complexity. We actually have a lot of support for that. We've actually passed it in one of the houses in the past, in the House, and not in the Senate. It got bogged down. We got a good chance of getting that passed today. Well, if we look at some of the other things, we're in a disagreement with the IRS on creating a class of registered tax return preparers. Why is that? Why is it that they're trying to do that? Well, they want to regulate people who prepare simple tax returns, but they want to do it in a way that in effect creates a fourth class of regulated tax preparers or tax experts, lawyers, enrolled agents, and CPAs. It creates a fourth class. We don't think that that's necessary. We think they've gone about it in the wrong way. We actually had a compromise with them about 6 years ago on the issue. That got thrown out by the courts. And then this commissioner and this IRS put forward a voluntary program that we have some really concerns with. We offered ways to solve that. The IRS wasn't interested in that, and ultimately we filed suit against the IRS on this particular issue. But we're also trying to find a legislative solution. And just last week, there was a hearing in the Senate in which actually the Democrats in the Senate put forward our compromise solution on the tax ID bill, an ID theft bill. Ultimately, on a party line vote, the Republicans did not put the amendment in the bill, but the Republicans actually support our compromise as well. They just wanted the ID theft bill to go through without any amendment. So we've laid some groundwork to try to get that fixed in the long run. The ID bill is something that's very important to all citizens. There's huge challenges from a theft perspective. ID theft perspective, and the Congress is trying to take charge of that issue rather than just the IRS from a regulatory perspective. We'll see if those remedies actually produce something. I will tell you, I think this will get through Congress before the elections, this tax ID bill. We also support, and this is a state obviously knows a lot about disaster relief and the challenges of Sandy. We also are proposing that there needs to be a permanency put forward in the disaster relief provisions of the Internal Revenue Code. This notion of declaring things and funding things. Unfortunately, natural disasters have become sort of commonplace. It's just where they happen that's different. And doesn't it make sense for us to rationalize that so that people can get the benefits of those things and get their lives back together? We just finished tax season. I can tell you the sort of unofficial, we have a survey workout, and I would encourage you, all firms, to respond to it. It's very important in our advocacy areas with the Congress. I can tell you that the general feedback is that most people would say this was a better tax season than the last two. I didn't say it was a great tax season. I said it was a better tax season. And IRS services have improved. Now, this little cartoon on this slide, if you read the bottom, it goes off of what was a common term with the IRS last year. This is a man and a woman, and it says, let's not call it a breakup, let's just call it a courtesy disconnect. And that's what the IRS called their phone system last year. They had a process in which if you were on hold for 2 hours last year, it felt like 2 years. Felt like 2 years, yeah, that's right. If you were on hold for 2 hours, you got a courtesy disconnect under the theory that no one should have to be on hold for longer than 2 hours, right? So, interesting theory. But clearly the IRS for the last 2 years have had serious problems in service. They made some improvements this year, and so I've been critical of the IRS in the service area, and I will acknowledge that they made some improvements. The commissioner clearly understood that issue. They put some additional resources there. The fact of the matter, though, the tension between the IRS and the Congress is at an all-time high. It has been for about 3 years. And these remedies are not going to come about probably until we get to 2017 in any kind of permanent way. To express that, we did something unique this year. To express it to Congress of how bad this was, we actually had tax practitioners from around the country, targeted tax practitioners related to members of Congress, to fly into Washington in the middle of tax season to go visit with the appropriate members of Congress to tell them how bad the service issues really were at the IRS. The theory being, and the message that they delivered was, look, these people are taking a day out of the busiest part of their professional lives to come here and tell you how bad it is. That's how bad it really is. And it was very effective from that standpoint, and we're hoping to see continued traction from that standpoint. Just to cover other issues, cash basis, or the ability to use cash basis for professional services firms, is an issue that was part of a proposal 2 years ago that we were able to derail. That will resurface. The reason why that will resurface in 2017 is that the budget scoring on eliminating cash basis is about $26 billion. And so in a pay-for basis, that will come about from that standpoint. You might also pay attention to the DOL overtime rules. There is a proposal that will probably be adopted in July that will raise the salary threshold for people who are automatically exempted from overtime from about $25,000 to about $50,000, a little bit over $50,000. And so that means in some firms that you could be facing some of those things. This is a map of a couple of state issues. One is the definition of attest. What we do as a profession is regulated in state laws. But what is reserved to CPAs in many states has had a traditional definition of audit, review, and compilation of historical-based and prospective financial information. The world of attestation is much broader than that. We've actually have 37 states today that have enacted a new definition that we think is critical to positioning of the in the future and to have those services be reserved for CPAs. So we have work to do to go from 37 to all of the states, but we've been at this for about 5 years. It's difficult to get every state there, but we continue to work on it. Same thing is on something called firm mobility, and this is a particularly important issue for small firms, because if you don't physically have offices in multiple states, there's also a firm registration process that firms can inadvertently fail to comply with. And we are trying to get that fixed so that these inadvertent issues do not come into play. I have to spend just a couple of moments and then we'll shift into our proposal on quality. In 2015, we had a very, very bad report issued on the profession from the Department of Labor. We also have information in our own peer review process that shows some kinks in our armor as it relates to quality. The DOL report showed very significant numbers, I would say totally unaccepted percentages of audit failures in the ERISA audit area. And we put forward a 6-point plan to improve quality. It ranges from everything from the CPA exam, which we just announced some changes a couple weeks ago in the CPA exam that will go into effect in 2017, to enhancements and changes in the peer review process. This will begin to come into effect as we get into 2016's peer review processes into 2017. It is a critically important notion. There were certain segments of the DOL report in which literally 3/4 of the engagements looked at were failed audits. That is not a position that the profession can be successful in from that standpoint. And so from a self-regulatory perspective, we have to step up, and the profession has to step up. The way I like to describe it is we need to turn the dial, but not break the needle, right? We have to find ways to improve quality, but we can't create a system that really forces people to be out of that audit process. Fair value is an increasingly important area in our profession as to how we measure fair value. We have 2 new credentials being launched in this space. To begin with, these are going to be focused more on larger companies because of the complex financial instruments that they have, but it's a huge risk to the financial reporting system because these, particularly in financial institutions, huge numbers that are about fair value valuations, and there's a lot of uncertainties from that standpoint. Our sponsor today talked about their services to not-for-profit, a growing segment of our society, of our economy, and also the rules and regulations becoming more and more complex in that area. And so this is an example of some specific support that we're doing in those areas, again, in the notion of quality and enhancing the accountability from that standpoint. So I said we had multiple parts. So let's talk about the evolution of the AICPA and the profession from this standpoint. First off, we are committed to the core and to the CPA. CPA exam is at the core of what we do. We're the only professional body in the world that still prepares and grades the professional certification exam for a profession in this country. Everything else is in state government. We think that's strategically critical. But to be critical, we have to have the exam really reflect society and what's expected with people. We go through a very sophisticated process of evaluating what skills people are actually deploying in the marketplace and embedding that in the exam. In fact, we do the exam here in New Jersey, in Ewing, New Jersey. Our whole exam operation is conducted right outside of Princeton. And we just announced on April 4th that beginning in 2017, we're going to have some changes to the exam. It's still going to be a 4-part exam. We're going to test higher level skills in each of the areas, particularly in auditing, putting much greater emphasis on analytical skills that are necessary in the modern audit. And obviously, the exam begins to have an impact on driving change in the academic community, which is very important. We also have a huge amount of efforts in the pipeline. We actually have, and this is a real key element of the profession today, we actually have, since 2008, every year, except one, we've had record numbers of people graduating in accounting. One of those years was flat. That's a very good thing. But there are different migration patterns today from people on the graduating scene. In the 80s, in the 90s, the common migration pattern was people would graduate from college in accounting and they would go to a public accounting firm. Then they might take their career in a variety of different places. Today, we're much more likely to see, and in fact, the percentages are significantly higher, people going directly to business and industry, government, and education and other areas. That has an impact on people whether or not they take the CPA exam. In fact, the percentage of people who take the CPA exam when they go to work in public accounting versus if they go to work directly in business and industry is a huge difference. Employers in business and industry want to invest in their people as well, but they want to invest in them in a potentially different area. So the pipeline is important. Service evolution is important to the pipeline. We have to be a profession that people see our services evolving with the times. This is a study we just did with CGMA that talks about the notion of integrated thinking and how we have to develop those skills in order to really be successful in creating value to the people who hire us as in a client relationship or as an employer. And integrated thinking is about the notion of looking at not just the financial information, but all of the aspects of the business and being able to strategically put those together for better decision making. That's the key to integrated reporting. This is a very interesting, it's called joining the dots. It is a very interesting set of facts related to where financial management and I would say advisory services and CPA firms really is going. And this talks about how people perform if they've been exposed to a greater degree of competencies in integrated thinking, how they create value from that standpoint, and what companies really are looking for today in this complex world. It gives us a platform of saying where we need to improve. In fact, employers say that the people they hire and the people they hire in accounting and management accounting, really they want to see them improve, and they want their CPA firms bringing to the table better integrated thinking about their entire business environment. And so integrated thinking and integrated reporting ultimately is about a new way of business communication to stakeholder groups. And integrated reporting is something that's happening around the world, including attestation on integrated reporting, but not so much in the United States. There's a lot of impediments to this in the United States, and one of them, of course, is our regulatory and legal structure. But in Asia and Europe and South Africa and Australia, integrated thinking, integrated reporting is about taking not just the business financial statement, but the totality of the strategic approach of the business model and reporting on that. So a much broader footprint of reporting, which leads us to the change in electronic information, big data, technology approaches. Clearly, as a profession, we need to begin to think about data in a different way. We are rapidly at the point of no longer doing, for instance, test of transactions in an audit. Today, the largest 4 firms are investing hundreds of millions of dollars of how do we embed artificial intelligence and how do we embed big data into audit types of approaches. How do we leverage this information to provide value or to do better audits depending on the service? A couple of examples. So today, one of the big 4 firms has an artificial intelligence system that reads every contract for their clients. Not a human reading it, but a system reading it, spitting out those contracts as to their accounting implications and highlighting those that need to have human intervention. It's totally changing the audit environment. There is another firm that has experimented with using big data and access to big publicly available databases that actually, instead of doing the audit by visiting the client, actually accesses big data and replicates the books, records, and financial information of the client without ever touching the client, and then comparing the output, the financial statement that they have created, versus the financial statement that the management of that company has created. Now, you might say, geez, that sounds like, how could that be? In certain areas, for instance, hedge funds and the like, that capability is readily available today. A total different mindset of how audits might evolve. How our services evolve is important as well. This year, in 2016, we're going to be, 2 in 2016 and 1 in early 2017, we're going to be issuing 3 guides on attestation in the cybersecurity space. We believe that when you look at 1933 or 1934 and the birth of auditing in this country the way we know it today, cybersecurity challenges are that potential outcome today. Businesses know they have cybersecurity risk. They know they have to take certain steps to minimize those risks. But if you're on the board or you're senior management, how do you actually know if you're delivering on those objectives? It is a concept ripe for attestation, third-party assurance to a board, to stakeholder groups, that a company has done everything it should be doing. It's a huge challenge in society, and it's one that the profession needs to step up to do. The 8 largest firms in the United States have all agreed that instead of them having a solution individually, that we need a profession-wide solution. The CEOs of all of those firms in the Institute are building the model from the standpoint of how this can transpire in society, and we're going to be issuing guides. It's been in process for about a year, and guides will be coming out in this particular space. It is the epitome of a broadening sense of assurance of what people really see as valuable in the marketplace today. which comes back to the future of auditing. And it actually doesn't say the future of auditing, it says auditing in the future, and that's a reason. It's about the evolution of auditing. It's not about whether or not we have auditing. We will have auditing, but we have to be willing to evolve that auditing approach, what we attest to, and how we get the evidence to issue that attestation. And it is happening very, very rapidly. Now here's what we worry about. Here's what we worry about inside the AICPA board and our governing council, which we've just had a big dialogue on. It is, how do we take this change that's happening with huge investments and make sure that it happens in all size firms? Will the marketplace produce those answers? Is there something we need to do to help populate that in different size firms? How are we going to train people to think that way with the evolution of auditing? What changes do we need to make in the standards? For instance, our standards say you have to do sampling. And it's pretty black and white. You have to do sampling. Well, if you do 100% look at transactions, we certainly don't want people to say, well, I have to do sampling on top of that. That would be a silly outcome, right? And so you might say, well, that's a common sense approach, but then there's legal ramifications if you don't make those changes. And so we have projects in place. In fact, we have a major research project that's being headed by Rutgers, that we have taken some of the technologies that the 8 largest firms are deploying. They've made those available. Rutgers is centralized managing research to tie these approaches to the public interest in proving quality implications. That will then lead us to the ability to change standards for private company auditing and begin the change management process inside the profession as it relates to how we go about auditing in the future, including analytics or data, big data, and continuous monitoring. Which brings me to, if everything is changing, don't we as the professional body in the United States have to change? And what we have been doing for the last 4 years is we've had a joint venture with our partner in the UK, the Chartered Institute of Management Accountants. Our members in business and industry, which is about half of the profession, today we have about 400,000 members, a record high of the AICPA, and about in the 40 percentile, mid-40s percentage of those individuals work for corporate America. Those members have come to us and said, you know, the skill sets that we expect to deliver to our employers and what our employers pay us for is changing rapidly. We need to be able to create something that in fact is demonstrable from that standpoint. And instead of us creating that on our own, we went out and said, we're going to partner with somebody who's been doing this in this space. And there's an organization in the UK called CIMA, Chartered Institute of Management Accountants. None of their members in public practice, so there's no competition on our public practice side. And we evolved together with them what they had to create a global set of competencies and criteria and assessment or testing processes so that there would be in the private sector, not in the regulated space, a set of competencies for a credential called CGMA, Chartered Global Management Accountant, so that if companies move people around the world, they know that the competencies are the same, et cetera. And we did that through a joint venture with CIMA. Now, when we entered into that joint venture, we said, you know, there's a footprint issue, there's a reach of the CPA profession that we need to be concerned about on an international basis. So we want to partner with you, but we only want to partner with you if you want to imagine evolution in the future. We don't know exactly what that looks like when we began this process 4 years ago, but we wanted a process and a partner that was willing to look at it every 2 years, and we've done that. And the last go-round of that review, we came to the conclusion, their leadership group, their board equivalent and council, our AICPA board and council, came to the conclusion that what we should do is integrate the two organizations from a strategy, management, and operations perspective, but also find a way to protect the legacies of AICPA, CPA membership, and in their case, CIMA and their membership. And so what we've created is an opportunity to evolve that process where we would have a CPA-led organization that you all would be members of, in addition to being members of the AICPA, that begins to plant that seed, that tree, for the future to create a different footprint moving forward and creating a different advocacy footprint and a different service footprint in the world. This is what it looks like. We're creating an association, if the members vote for it, both their members and our members, We're creating an association that you would be a member of, not 2 dues, just 1 dues. You'd just pay your dues to AICPA. But we would have a global membership body of 650,000 people that looks at the profession from a totality perspective. Not just auditing, not just management accounting, but the totality of the profession, and a global reach between the 2 organizations in literally almost 30 countries. Changing the dynamics of how the profession is going to evolve long term, little bit by little bit over a period of time. Our governing council would remain the same, so your representatives on the AICPA governing council continue to be elected and selected by the society in exactly the same way. But we would evolve how we would operate. This is the ballot. It's pretty simple. Members have already received, it's an electronic ballot, an opportunity they can go onto a website and find out more information, but they can click on it and go vote. It's a yes or no type of vote, and CIMA is going through that process. And as you can see, what it says here is that we're going to integrate operations and strategy and management, expanding the resources, and essentially the key element of the vote is that we would become members of both AICPA and this association. CIMA members would be members of CIMA and this association. And it would be the majority, from a governance perspective, which I'll show you, will in fact be CPAs. So the benefits, members keep everything that they already have, and this is an and strategy. This book, you may be familiar with, it's called Built to Last by Collins, is the notion of and what he talks about is organizations that thrive in the long term are those who can execute an and strategy. Ultimately, if an organization only can be an or strategy, I can do this or that in changing times, at some point you're going to make a mistake. And if you're going to be this or that, when you make that mistake, it's pretty significant. And those that are built to last, which is the name of the book, are those who can execute an and strategy. I am this, I am those things that have traditionally made me successful, and I'm doing something that's focused on the future. And that's what this proposal is all about. So we protect the CPA, all of our self-regulatory activities, all public accounting type of issues remain exactly the same, and we're creating a global footprint for our profession that is US CPA led. So as I said, your member affiliation remains the same. Our council, we're committed to the core, to the pipeline of CPAs, to growing the profession from that standpoint, being the voice of the profession, and creating something on a global stage that is important. Now, what about the state? We have rolled this out in much more detail than I can do here today, obviously, but the support has been very strong in basically going through a detailed set of roadshows and the like. 52 state societies, including New Jersey's, has passed resolutions of support. All of the largest firms have passed resolutions of support, or virtually all, and sent communications out to their employees. Our small company, or small firm, I should say, committee, private companies executive committee, has gone through a detailed analysis, and they have supported it from a small firm perspective. You see all these other committees that have been involved in this particular aspect. And leaders in business. Now, I mean, a company like, let's say, Prudential here in New Jersey isn't going to pass a corporate resolution of support of something like this, but their senior leaders who are CPAs are also very supportive, and there are companies around the country that are in that environment. And so the way we would operate is that we would have 2 business units. We'd have a CPA business unit and a CGMA business unit. And in this case, on the left side, the CPA business unit is essentially the AICPA board. It's essentially all CPAs. We have 1 CIMA member on it, on that board, and we have 2 public members, which we presently do. So for instance, we have a former senator and a former member of the Congress that's a part of the AICPA board today. And on the CGMA board, we would have a certain number of CPA CGMAs, people from the United States on that board, as well as people from around the world from a CGMA perspective. So we have 2 business units, if you want to think about it in the commercial sense, 2 business unit boards, right? So if you want to think about it as General Motors, 2 business units that they occupy, Procter & Gamble or GE with their jet engines division and their consumer products division, et cetera. And these 2 boards combine into 1 global board that is at the association level. When you add those 2 together, there is a majority of CPAs on that board. The chair of the AICPA, the volunteer lead of the AICPA, 6 out of every 9 years will be the chair of that particular board. And that board will oversee the combined operation of the organization, again, with the notion of building something very significant for the future. Now, this is change. This is change. Now, what we've tried to do is say we're protecting our legacy and we're creating something for the future. It's and. And we've done that before as a profession. And sometimes the things that we've passed we forget about that we've changed. So, for instance, we used to not be able to advertise as a profession. And when that came about, people thought the world was going to come to end as a profession. I like to tell the story of the CPA exam to prove this particular point. I was involved in this process. At one point, and probably many of us in this room and on this webcast took a CPA exam, and we could not even use a calculator on it. When we had a proposal to put a $1.99 plastic 4-function calculator on the CPA exam, it was a 2-year debate. People thought the profession was going to crumble. And today, that sounds awfully funny. But literally, it was huge. It was emotional. We were going to ruin the CPA profession. After all, you should be able to do every calculation by hand on taking the CPA exam. How silly does that sound today? It was a huge fight. It was approved. About 5 years after that was approved, we had the debate on whether or not to computerize the CPA exam. And it was virtually no debate. This is change management. We have the issue of non-CPA ownership. The fact is, we are not fully owned profession today by CPAs. We're CPA-led, and that's what we're proposing, CPA-led. But today, a significant number of the client service people in CPA firms are not CPAs, and that continues to grow. That continues to grow. And people thought the profession was going to come to an end when that particular issue was decided as well. And today, the profession is more successful than it's ever been. And you can look at peer review the debates. You can talk about the implications of cloud computing. Each of these elements of change, there is the fear of change. But in every case, because we're a profession willing to deal with the future, just like what this proposal is about, we've come out stronger and positioned ourselves better. There is no guarantee that if you don't change, you will survive. There's no guarantee if you do change, you will survive. But the likelihood is that more progressive you are and the ability to look at the future and have an and strategy, the more chances of success long term. So that's the website. You should have received an email. There'll be other emails of reminders and things of that nature, and you can go on that site to vote as well. And I'm happy to obviously answer any questions related to that particular issue. We are in a position as a profession today with unbelievable opportunity. We are in a position today as a profession with unbelievable success and unbelievable brand recognition. I could bring you the leads of other professional bodies in this country or in this world into this room, and they would be very envious. But that position of strength is a ticket for us to be open for the future, to look at how auditing will look in the future, to look at how tax services will look in the future, to embrace the change, to create our own future, to not be the taxi cab industry that said, you really don't need a hailing app, to not be digital photography and Kodak and say, this is a fad, even though I have the technology, we're not going to do it. The fact is that the world will be more complex. We are the trusted advisors. And if we can embrace change, and if we can take risk and not get it all right every time, then in fact, we will be a trusted, important, and success factor for the world that's going to continue to evolve. And that is our calling in a lot of ways. We bring values, we bring competencies, we bring ethics in a world that is very uncertain. But if we are unable to change, then our own relevance will be challenged in that process. Thank you very much, and I look forward to a question and answer session here.
Thank you, Barry. We have a couple minutes for a couple questions now, if there are questions out there. And also questions from those who are on the webcast. If you want to write something in, we'll try to get them answered. Yes, I saw a hand. Brad Muniz.
Hi, Barry. At the council meeting, you gave a very nice presentation on the different industries that are moving into the attest function in the different countries. I don't know if you'd be willing to offer that up to the attendees here.
Well, right, it's part of the competition factor. So there are professional bodies that are trying to get audit rights. I think that's the one you're referencing to. We can go into it maybe in more detail after this, but I think that the importance is that people look at the United States and they say, how do I, as a professional, get rights to do things that are reserved to CPAs in the United States? And so the way I guess I would best describe that is, so we're the largest professional body in the world today. Obviously, if this vote goes, we will position ourselves to be the largest professional body for a long, long, long time, which I think is a very important global positioning. But for instance, we view the notion of American leadership as key. Other people view, how do we come into America and penetrate that process? So there are bodies whose view is, I want to create my credential to be acceptable in the United States, whereas we look at it and say it's important to provide the US or CPA-led process, and we know that there are other players in that marketplace. So that's just one example. The other part of competition is we know there are technology providers today that are seeking access to what is traditionally CPA reserved services, and I'll give you a quick example on that. We are in the internet management space. There's an organization called ICANN, which runs the internet. They have created a new system of what's called top-level domain names. So not just .com, .org, .edu, but you can get .whatever. So we are actively competing to own .cpa, which you would expect us to do, although other professional bodies didn't actually do this. Who is our competition for this? Google is our competition for .cpa. Why Google? Google obviously sees business opportunities and strategies that can play into what we do as a profession. It's a different type of notion of competition. So this is the way I say it. If Google announced tomorrow that they were going to produce 8 pieces of data on every business in the world, and that's the gospel, that's all you need to know, world, about every business, as CPAs would say, come on, too simple, crazy. Now let's roll forward 2 years. What do you think those 8 numbers would be? They'd be accepted by everybody. That's the type of competition risk that we face.
Well, I think we've come to our time slot here for the webinar and for the live session today. I certainly want to thank all of you who are here today in attendance. I want to thank those that are in attendance via the web. And hopefully, as I said, this has been a treat for you. The profession is changing as we sit here today. And it's our job to be able to stay abreast and step with those changes that are taking place. So with that, hope everybody will have a great weekend. Again, I want to thank Investors Bank for being our sponsor today. And for those of you who are here, take an opportunity to go back and chat with the representatives. And those of you on the web, go to your local Investors Bank branch and have a conversation and discussion. Thank you and have a great weekend, everyone.